Marketers don't need more data, they need smarter data. When you unify your first-party customer data and layer it with predictive AI, you move from generic messaging to precise, revenue-driving actions. Whether it's suppressing low-propensity audiences, expanding high-value segments, or optimizing media efficiency, organized data is the engine that powers real growth. That's a quote from Matt Greitzer and a sneak peek at today's episode. Welcome to Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast, the show where growth-minded business leaders learn how to turn marketing into a measurable revenue engine. I'm your host, Kerry Curran, revenue growth obsessed, go-to-market expert, and industry analyst. Each week, I sit down with the brightest minds in marketing, sales, and customer success to unpack the real-world strategies that drive sustainable growth. If you like what you hear, please be sure to follow, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite platform. It helps us reach more leaders like you. Today's episode is all about the power and the promise of unified customer data. From siloed to strategic, how unified customer data fuels predictive marketing, I'm joined by Matt Greitzer. He's the CEO and co-founder of Actable. Together, we explore how smart brands are turning fragmented data into actionable intelligence using AI, clean cloud infrastructure, and strategic alignment across teams. Whether you're dealing with outdated systems or trying to scale predictive modeling, this episode walks through the foundations of better segmentation, smarter media targeting, and lifestyle personalization that drives real results. Stay tuned until the end to hear Matt's practical advice for data readiness and what to do if ESP is still your database. Let's go. So welcome, Matt. Please introduce yourself and share your background and expertise.
Sure. Hi, Kerry. Thanks for having me. My name is Matt Greitzer, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Actable. And Actable is a company that works with enterprises to organize and enhance their first-party customer data to get them ready for AI-driven scoring and segmentation.
Excellent. And so you've been in the media space and media buying and strategy. So talk a bit kind of your background to what before you got to Actable and how you identified the need for customer data.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's right. I spent 20 years in media and ad tech and advertising. I started my career in the dial-up era at a company called Avenue A, which became Razorfish, and had a few different roles there. But the most formidable one for me was running the search engine marketing practice at Razorfish, where I really got into sort of the quantitative side of marketing. I then started the programmatic media practice at Razorfish, and eventually left to start my own business with a former co-founder of mine called Accordant Media, which was a programmatic trading desk, one of the first trading desks in the space. Again, using sort of quantitative information to make better media buying decisions. We got acquired by Dentsu in 2016, and through that acquisition, we ended up running the programmatic practice at Dentsu. And Dentsu had made another acquisition, actually the same day that they acquired my business, Accordant Media. They acquired a much larger company called Merkle. Mm-hmm. And that's actually where I first got exposed to first-party customer data. And we worked very closely with one of the groups at Merkle that was using first-party customer data to build customer segmentation and use that for targeting in the advertising space. And I really saw from that experience that was going to be the future in terms of how marketers were going to be able to create differentiation in the space with all the things that were happening with signal deprecation, and the on the other side of that, the desire to create personalized experiences and really tailor messaging to individuals, that first party customer data was going to be core. And so I left Dentsu in 2019, and in 2020 we started Actable. A co-founder of mine, named Craig Shin, longtime colleague of mine. We worked at Razorfish together for many years. We worked at Accordant Media together. And our thesis with Actable was that enterprises were going to create differentiation with their own
Hmm.
customer data, but they were going to need help in organizing it in a coherent way across their enterprises, and in connecting the thread between the owners of the technology, which is largely IT,
Yeah.
in these enterprises, and the users of that technology, which is marketing, and sort of being that translating layer between the two, from a strategic standpoint, but also from a services standpoint, was really the foundation of Actable, and we've stayed really true to that since inception.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, you've got such a rich background and expertise around both sides of it. As you said, the media buying and the goal of getting smarter and more targeted to your audiences, but also the internal challenges of connecting the data and to your point, IT or whoever owns the cloud. I always think back to like the late 2000s when big data was such a big buzzword, and it was like brands and marketers and agencies suddenly had this influx of data. But now we've seen that evolution of how smart people can really get with that. So talk about kind of the business challenges you're seeing directly with some of the brands you've helped, and kind of where that data connection kind of applies at a strategic level.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the business challenges are the same business challenges that anybody in marketing or advertising is encountering.
Yeah.
They want more efficient cost per acquisition. They want to
Hmm.
reduce churn. They want to increase retention, right? So the business challenges are fundamental. What we do is we come at this from an angle that says, hey, you've all invested a ton of money in technology and in data collection over the last decade.
Yeah.
Uh, Almost universally, enterprises have suboptimally organized that data to
Hmm.
create advantage for themselves in the ecosystem. So what we do is we come at this, and again, the business challenges are generally the same, but what we perceive as the problem is that most enterprises do not have a coherent, well organized infrastructure of
Yeah.
customer data that they can then deploy downstream. And so it's kind of like, the engine of your car. You don't buy the car for the engine. You buy the car because you want to go places, but you need the
Hmm.
engine, or the motor if you're electric, but you need the engine or the motor
Yeah.
to go places. And so if you don't have that, then you can't really utilize that data effectively. And so
Hmm.
you're right, big data and all of the talk of sort of data driven marketing and the opportunity.
Yeah.
And I was, in the center of that when we were in the programmatic media space.
Hmm.
That hasn't really come to fruition, and a lot of that is
Right.
because customer data at the core needs to be well structured. So what we can do is come in with a very strong point of view on how that can happen in a sort of fast and efficient way, and then that creates a foundation that allows you to create advantage with that customer data. Increasingly today, in our focus in that is if you're trying to create unified customer experiences, how do you layer AI and machine learning on top of that data to really
Hmm.
understand customer value, touch points that are going to drive customer action, and then port those into your downstream channels in a unified and coordinated way. If you don't have a single view of the customer and you don't have a solid infrastructure for understanding that and for analyzing that, you can't do any of that. You're sort of channel blind.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, it's not just for ad targeting. That's kind of one of the activations, but you've talked about kind of the holistic customer view. Talk about kind of how you're using that for just business goals of predictive
Yeah.
modeling, churn, purchase.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example. We work with a top 10 grocer, and they're doing 16 to $20 billion of revenue annually, and they have a problem where if they churn a customer, that's a big revenue opportunity.
Right.
You go to a grocery store, you're going to go there every week for 52 weeks a year, and
Yep. Yep.
your overall revenue value for that grocer is significant. So churn is an issue. Um, we helped them unify customer data across in-store sales, website, app, to understand customer engagement and identify signals of people who are at risk for churn. And if you can identify people who are at risk for churn, then you can take preventative action to keep them from churning. So this was a huge opportunity for them. We really, um, it's a $60 million plus annual opportunity for them to solve for this problem.
Yep.
And they wouldn't be able to do this without a unified understanding of what are the signals that are predictive of churn, and then how can we interact to prevent that when it happens. And so there's other sort of very specific use case um, uh, sort of use case driven applications of this data, and that's kind of what we've been working with our customers on. Is all right, what is, to your earlier question, what is that business challenge? Is it churn, or is it basket size? Is it acquisition? And how do we use this data to identify the right signals that we can then deploy interventions in the right way to affect them?
Yeah, no, it's so smart and so valuable. And I think you'd mentioned before as well, you're predicting the next purchase or the propensity to purchase. So then again, you can kind of use that data to encourage that and drive that extra purchase or basket size. It sounds so smart. So talk about kind of you mentioned grocery, but what are some of the other verticals that you work with today?
Yeah, retail is big for us.
Hmm.
So we do a lot of work in the retail space across the board. Grocer, apparel, sort of big box multi-category retailers. Also, key categories for us would be CPG.
Hmm.
Ton of work in the CPG space. They're like more nascent in their customer data efforts, but helping them figure out, now that they have this data, how do they have a relationship with the customer. And then publishing has been big for us.
Yep.
Subscription and ad driven publishing, where like understanding that customer is sort of existential for them, and really being able to unify customer data across platforms is critical. And then financial services has been the fourth. So I would say those four categories. We've got I would say a capability specialty, and not a vertical specialty, but
Hmm.
retail, CPG, publishing, and financial services have been the four that we've got the most experience in.
Hey everyone, it's me, Kerry Curran. If you're a B2B company that sells to marketers, whether you're an agency, MarTech, or AdTech, and your revenue is either flattening, declining, or just not growing fast enough, I can help. I've spent my entire career selling, marketing, and servicing marketers, so I know firsthand the challenges they face, the buying decisions they make, and what actually moves the needle. The truth is, most marketing strategies aren't built for revenue growth, but mine are. As your fractional chief growth officer, I'll bring revenue-focused marketing strategies designed specifically for selling to marketers, deep expertise in agency, MarTech, and AdTech buying behaviors, modern go-to-market strategies that include everything from brand awareness to driving loyalty and retention, and a track record of doubling and even tripling revenue for B2B companies just like yours. So if you're tired of your stagnant results and you're ready to build a marketing engine that actually drives revenue, let's talk. Visit revenuebasedmarketing.com or connect with me on LinkedIn to schedule a consultation. Together, let's build a smarter, more profitable path forward. RBMA, Revenue-Based Marketing Advisors, where revenue-based marketing that works. Definitely. Yeah, I can see how the the data solutions and the insights that you're able to uncover really do help across a variety. And so talk a bit about kind of the technology and kind of what you're going into. I know you're going into the cloud, you're looking at the different data sets. Talk a bit about that process.
Yeah, I mean, for us, like the starting point is almost always like a well-structured cloud customer data warehouse. And you'd be surprised how many enterprises don't have that. It's just a fundamental building block, and it's more and more critical for the ability to utilize all of the other tooling that's being built in the space, whether it's martech
Hmm.
or ad tech. Like that root of customer data at the core
Yeah.
is super important for us. Google is our primary partner there. We feel like they have a great set of utilities to
Hmm.
enable those capabilities. And then, you know, so we would always say you almost always should start there. And if you don't
Yeah.
have that, that's sort of the first thing that you need to do. And you can get something up and running that's highly functional and highly useful for like not that much time and not that much money. And that would be unifying web data, transaction data, offline data,
Hmm.
and media exposure data across web, email and advertising, and like that would be a good starting point. Um, from there, we do a lot of work in the customer data platform space.
Yep. Yep.
So I think 4 or 5 years ago they were sort of seen as like the answer to this problem. Increasingly today, they're sort of part of the solution, but not
Hmm.
the answer. And customer data platforms that facilitate orchestration and customer experience, and then that facilitate identity resolution, so you can really understand like who your customer is across channels. And then downstream from that, where we've spent a lot of time is um, uh, really homegrown capabilities that we've built in AI scoring and segmentation. There's just
Hmm.
so much opportunity there, and it's been a core focus of our business for the last couple of years. Really trying to create customized but really scalable solutions for our customers, so that they can very very specifically understand who their customers are, how they segment across value, interaction points, levers that they react to, and doing that in an automated and always on way that can deploy downstream into activation channels.
Hmm. That's great. So it sounds like you are you're organizing and unifying the data and then identifying how to segment and connect it with AI. And so that allows you to really put that predictive modeling into place for some of those solutions we were talking before about, you'd mentioned before.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And we can do it, like in digital channels and also in non-digital channels. So I'll
Hmm.
just give you another example. We do a lot of work around propensity modeling and propensity to purchase.
Yeah.
So we work with a large retailer that was historically a cataloger, and what we found for them is that mailing catalogs to high propensity purchasers doesn't really have much lift. They're going to buy anyway.
Hmm.
However, if you mail catalogs to low propensity purchasers, it has a huge lift, and it
Yeah.
incentivizes them and reminds them. We didn't go too deep into the why, but in this case,
Yeah.
we've
Yeah.
seen the results. That for whatever reason, those low propensity users are impacted immensely by the catalog. So, from like an optimization standpoint, catalog mailer, they've been doing this for 50 years, but being able to segment by propensity, because they now have a unified customer data store that they can enable to come up with with these kinds of insights about who's going to buy and who's not. It allows them to be much more effective in what's a pretty high cost outbound channel.
Yeah,
So
that's incredible. And yeah, to your point, going back to just being more effective with your media investment, like that's a huge cost savings and more targeted and connected to driving those business results. So I think it's so smart.
yeah, on the media side, like a pretty common use case that we've seen is suppression,
Mm,
because you're
yeah.
targeting and you want to be as efficient as you can with high cost media. So just suppressing, you know, low propensity customers is a one tactic that we've seen. But again, you can't do that. One tactic we've seen that works very very well
Yeah.
to create efficiency, but you can't do that if you don't know who your low propensity customers are, and you won't know that unless you've organized your data in a well structured way that you can then layer some predictive
Yeah.
intelligence on top of. So it's sort of like, again, the engine of the car, and then you can go places.
Yeah, no, I can imagine so many different use cases as well of just more customized messaging and ad creative. Getting the more granular you are, the more you know about the customers because of the connection of the data points. So this sounds so brilliant. I know part of the challenge, especially with data, is when data that lives under marketing strategies tends to be owned by or valued by the CMO, but the CMO doesn't necessarily own the data, and that can be just a big challenge of itself. So, talk to us about how you've navigated selling in beyond the CMO and getting the buy-in of, hey, we want access to your data, and this is what we're going to do with it when there's not as much connection to advertising and marketing.
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten very good at making the business case for it, because we understand if you do these things, you can reduce churn by 10%. You can increase your media efficiency by 5%. So there's we have enough success in this so far that we can put some numbers behind it and say here's
Mm-hmm.
the investment, and this is the ROI against it. But then there's also sort of the organizational alignment, because you're
Mm-hmm.
absolutely right. The data that we're talking about is not exclusively, but predominantly marketing, who is going to
Yeah.
benefit from that. It has other applications, sales and product, and I mean, I guess those fall under marketing classically, but different
Yeah.
organizations will utilize it. But it's the marketing team who's going to use it for life cycle and for acquisition. But IT or information, CIO, CTO are typically the stewards of the infrastructure there. So we just speak both languages, and where we've um, I would say found a niche in the space is, we don't come at this from a technology perspective. We don't come at it from a marketing perspective. We come at it from a use case perspective and a business outcomes perspective. And because we can speak marketing and we can speak IT, we can have a conversation with those stakeholders to help them understand what has to happen for this to work, and then what the
Mm-hmm.
benefits are, and then create alignment across those groups. And I find that they do want to work together, like they want to support each other, but they're not always clear on the best way to do that,
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of reasons. And so we're a good translation layer, and that's, I think, it's not like a value that we tout in the market, but it's one of the things that we bring to the table, which helps our customers move a lot faster and more effectively.
Yeah, definitely. And because I know that's often a challenge, and but it also represents the fact that revenue growth and a lot of core marketing initiatives become a whole company strategy and uh, need for that kind of integrated approach. And data quality and kind of just security is also so important there as well
Yeah, well,
in the
exactly.
governance.
Because if you're talking about advertising or email, it's pretty clear who owns advertising and email.
Hmm.
If you're talking about customer data, who in the organization who owns that?
Yeah.
Some organizations have a like a very well defined chief data officer or chief information officer sometimes, who is the steward and is the translator across the organization. But we find that's the exception, and more often than not, it's ambiguous, and
Yeah.
it's an asset. It's an incredible asset, but you have to have somebody who can come in and sort of show an organization how to unlock it, which is what we do.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant and so necessary, needed in so many ways. So you've definitely found it great way to help a lot of companies. So for those who are listening and are thinking, I need Matt, I need to get started with such a smart approach. Like you mentioned a little some of this before, but what are the kind of readiness or foundations that a retailer or CPG or publisher really need to have in place before they are ready to start integrating the data and getting smarter?
Well, I don't. I would say there's nothing you necessarily need in place to get started here. We work with customers at really any point in the maturity curve. Some who have, very very early on, who have no core customer database and have no cloud presence. and maybe their ESP is their customer database, down to the other end of the spectrum where people have very, very well organized and sophisticated installations. But as a starting point, wherever you are on that spectrum, we always start with the use cases
Mm-hmm.
and to think through. All right, if I had this unified view, and if I could better understand these customer dynamics, what would that allow me to do more effectively or more efficiently as an organization? And then how could I
Mm-hmm.
use that against those business goals that we're targeting? That's a good place to start because that gives you an idea of like, all right, well, how would this change my world if I had
Right.
these things
Right.
together? And then, more specifically, we've got sort of a customer data readiness assessment on our
Mm-hmm.
website that and anybody can find, and it's a pretty quick kind of 5 minute quiz or questionnaire that you can fill out, and it'll give you a point of view on sort of where you are in that journey, and then what the next steps might be in order to advance and accelerate it. But I would say, use cases are a good starting point, and there's no barrier to wherever you are on that curve. There's an improvement to be made.
Yeah, definitely, Matt. This is super helpful. And so, how do they find you and your website and that assessment?
Sure. Yeah. So we are actable.com, actable.com. And I'm just Matt at actable.com. So if anybody listening wants more information or a point of view on where they are and how we might be able to help, feel free to reach out.
Excellent. Thank you. And we'll make sure to have the link to that assessment in the show notes as well as the other information. But Matt, thank you so much. Again, I think this is so smart, and I'm sure this brought a lot of value to our listeners today. So thank you for sharing your wisdom
Great.
with us.
Great. Thanks for having me, Kerry. It was fun, and hope the information was helpful for your listeners.
Thanks for listening to Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast. If this episode gave you a new way to think about customer data, predictive modeling, or cross-functional alignment, send it to a teammate or your favorite data partner. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. It helps other revenue leaders find us. And if you're ready to unlock smarter segmentation, cleaner data, and better results across your go-to-market strategy, visit revenuebasedmarketing.com. Until next time, organize smarter, activate faster, and always optimize for revenue.